It's a beautiful evening here in rural Nottinghamshire. Almost seems like a shame to spoil it by talking about Tommy Robinson and Nigel Farage, the two most important controlled opposition figures in Britain. I can hear the gasps of derision, astonishment from the groupies and their trolls foaming at the mouth with their usual litany of abuse yet to be unleashed. No doubt that'll come later. So why is Tommy Robinson controlled opposition? Well, in honesty, I think we've covered this subject a few times, but we're going to do it a little deeper tonight. So over the last 15 years, what exactly has Tommy Robinson achieved? Well, he's grifted in excess of 7 million. We know that for a fact, although he refuses to release any audited accounts. What has happened to that money? Has it been put into any form of political activism? Has he changed the socio-political environment of this country? He's done none of those things. He's enriched himself. Yes, quite extensively in actual fact. But he's not created a mass movement of any description that can change this country for the better. Now, Tommy will always tell you what's wrong, in his opinion. He needs to do that whilst looking in the mirror, in actual fact. But he will never be able to tell you how to fix it. Now, a classic example is the book he wrote with McLaughlin, that so-called former communist, in which they basically highlighted pretty much everything that was wrong in the country. But for a book titled Manifesto, there was actually no manifesto for change. So we must assume from that there is absolutely no intention to change anything. And as for that ridiculous pledgedom between Paul Thorpe and Richard Inman and Danny Salmon, well, I mean, just look what happened to that. It lasted, what, 8 months? And disintegrated completely, embarrassing Ben Habib and others in the process. I wonder how they feel now with egg dripping down their face. Oh, well, that's their problem, isn't it? Should have studied their subject matter far better, is my opinion. So what has Tommy achieved? Again, nothing other than self-enrichment. I mean, his trolls are very good at attacking people, smearing, gaslighting and lying, and obviously refusing to hand over audited accounts. And in truth, that's all Tommy has achieved. He has greased his ego enormously, enriched his bank accounts significantly, although that's mired in false accounting, as we know from the recent dilemma with his wife at Company's House. But other than that, what has Tommy done? Well, absolutely nothing. He's basically been platformed by the likes of Elon Musk now, and even funded by him, and also the well, how do we describe the Tate brothers? Well, let's wait until the legal cases against them have been concluded, shall we? Then we'll have a far more accurate description of the Tate brothers. So this is all Tommy's done. He's got some notable people to swallow his claptrap, quite frankly. But there is absolutely no manifesto for change, because Tommy is not here to change a thing. And so turning to the other grandiose con man, Nigel Farage. Well, I made a video earlier proving beyond contest that Nigel Farage was centrifugal in the theft of the Brexit Party copyright. In fact, the entire blueprint, yes, in 2018, and they asked Catherine Blakelock to get that party name for him. One would presume by any means necessary. Well, it's all backfiring on them right now, isn't it? So that's just one lie with Nigel Farage. Of course, there are many. I mean, there are innumerable lies. Where do we start with the snake oil salesman who gave us Brino and mass immigration on an unprecedented scale? There's no sign of Brexit on the horizon anywhere, in actual fact. I think that one's well and truly sunk. Well, it is, whilst people are clinging to fake Farage for their so-called salvation. There is no salvation coming from Nigel Farage and his deep fake reform. And how do we know this? Well, he flat-packed UKIP at the critical moment when the media and the establishment said it was time for them to go. That's exactly what he did. Off he trotted to the United States with 450 grand from Aaron Banks. Yes, and of course, where his money comes from, well, that's another matter as well, isn't it? I think that's been covered quite extensively as well. So Then we move on to the Brexit party, which I just mentioned, and that got flat packed as well. And he scuttled off again to make even more money, which is really what Nigel's all about, isn't it? Making money, you know, and stashing it in his offshore tax havens on the Isle of Man, in particular. Just like his chum, Richard Tyas, another tax evading con man, incurable liar. And I have the evidence to prove he's an incurable liar, particularly in the context of the letter he wrote to me about the Brexit party. Well, we've trashed all of their lies. That's child's play. It's easy. There's nothing difficult about it in actual fact. So when they can't even be honest about the name of a political party and where they got it from, and that they did it deceitfully and then spread a pack of lies to cover their dirty tracks, how can anyone trust them on any other issue? And of course, one of the most notorious lies they spouted in that ridiculous troll trope by Andrew Reid and the daft cartoonist Simon Carr was that apparently I published on my website a demand that NHS nurses, maternity nurses that is, you know, must never receive a pay rise. Oh yes, that's such emotive narcissism, isn't it? Such manipulation, so transparent. Not a shred of evidence to prove it, of course, yet again, because these people don't do due diligence and evidence. They just spout lies and false promises, which is what all snake oil salesmen do. And that's why they're doing it. And they've all been found out and caught lying again and again and again. So what's new? Oh, there's a great deal new in actual fact, and there's much more to come from these people. So they robbed the Brexit party, they flat packed it in a deal with the Tories, and we have every reason to believe now that at the critical moment, Farage and his gang will flat pack Reform UK when it comes to the crunch, leaving the entire political hemisphere in this country in total disarray, calculated disarray, that is. Yeah, and we'll be left to pick up the pieces once again. And I've no doubt Nigel will saunter off to his little Yankee paradise and retire with lots of money with Donald Trump and company. So the issue is, with Farage, what is he actually going to deliver? So what's making up fairy tales about me demanding the privatisation of the NHS, and also that maternity nurses must never receive a pay rise, that is, never. Astonishing, isn't it? You know, how anybody could actually believe that, beggars believe. But then they bought his snake oil lies on Brexit, didn't they? So I suppose, you know, it's not hard to understand why they'll swallow any old drivel that comes out of his mouth. So, in actual fact, Reform is intending to privatise the NHS. This is what narcissistic liars do, you see. They project their lies onto other people. Whatever they're doing, they'll accuse you of doing. That's how they cover their tracks. That's how they conceal their dirty tricks and their future plans. And so, what has Nigel Farage actually got to deliver, particularly on immigration? Well, we've seen him flip-flop that many times, in actual fact, particularly in the last year, and notably on the Winston Marshall's show, where he said, you know, we can't win without Islam. Why can't we win without Islam? They're 6% of the population. Why can't we win without Islam? Why does he need Islam? Because he sold the chairmanship of Reform UK to Zia Yusuf, 200 grand, was it? Is that why he needs Islam? We can't politically alienate Islam, he said. And he made it perfectly clear that he had no intention of carrying out mass deportations, only for him to do a complete U-turn. But we got wind of that when he came here, well, close by, to stay at Eastwood Hall, and then a so-called secret meeting at Denby Lodge in Derbyshire, where we had people listening to what they were saying. And he told people there that he was going to make a promise before the local elections last week to deport all boat invaders, according to Farage. There's no substance in any of it. He'd already said on the Winston Marshall show that he had no intention of deporting them. Mass deportations just didn't cut it. It was politically and strategically impossible. So that is the real Nigel Farage, isn't it? Or is the real Nigel Farage the one we saw the week before the local elections? The point I'm making is no one will ever know where they stand with Nigel Farage, because he flip-flops, he U-turns, he changes his mind on such a regular basis, it's impossible to take the man seriously. But people are taking him seriously, and the reason why? Because they're desperate for change, utterly crying out for genuine reform, and that's why they're being seduced by this con man. And of course, there's the tandem act. You know, if he fails, we have little Tommy. You know, the Irish criminal, grifter, fraudster, et al. And Katie Hopkins, of course, yes, another centre-right controlled opposition clown, claims that when he's released from prison, if he is, in actual fact, we'll see, he's going to completely demolish Nigel Farage and build a mass movement. It's just never going to happen. I mean, these people must be on LSD, surely, you know? Tommy, build a mass movement and beat Nigel Farage at the ballot box. My goodness. Well, even if he could, what good would it do? Because they're both controlled opposition. We saw that Farage, of course, colluded with Hope Not Hate, those rabid neo-communists. And that notorious video with Matt Collins in 2013, was it? With our Red Army comrade. Yes, they're the people that Nigel Farage has been in bed with. And he's still in bed with them now. I mean, Nick Laws does a little bit of ranting once in a while about Farage. You know, like after the elections last week. Oh, it's really alarming that the people that we vetted to stand for Reform UK have actually won. I mean, come on, get a grip. You've got to be completely insensible, stupid in actual fact, quite frankly, to swallow any of this pantomime. And that's all it is. It's a contrived public relations pantomime to further the status quo's control over this safety valve operation. And anyone who thinks Nigel Farage isn't controlled opposition, okay, let's go back to 2019 with that notorious comment he made on LBC. He said, UKIP was only ever a barometer to measure anti-establishment sentiment. Now there's your admission that UKIP was a safety valve operation, and so was the Brexit Party, which they stole from me. Okay, I'll carry on making that point, which they stole from me, and they're never going to stop me from making that point either, more to the point. And then, of course, we go to Reform UK, and it's flip-flopping all over the place. Policy on the hoof, is it? Or is there any policy? And another thing with Reform UK, their so-called policy on free speech was stolen from me almost entirely word for word last year when I published it for the second time. I wrote it originally in HMP Nottingham when I was on remand for hurty words in March 2015. And I was released a few days later from Nottingham Crown Court and published, this reform agenda. And there's another thing. Reform UK, imitating the Reform Agenda UK, which I started in February 2011. You know, they just seem to have this enormous problem with imitation and lying, don't they? And that's the whole point with a safety valve operation. The safety valve operators see good ideas. They think, wow, we need to take control of this. We need to imitate it, take it out of their hands, take it under our control, basically. And that is how the status quo maintains control over the entire country, by using these con men. Now, if you're in the grip of these con artists, Farage and Robinson, then it's entirely up to you if you stay with them. And particularly if you're giving money to them, particularly in the case of Tommy, I just wonder how much of that's been snorted up his nose. I mean, at one stage, it was £1,500 worth of coke a week. So, yes, absolutely. And what's Farage done with his £25 subscriptions to Reform UK? Oh, well, he won over 600 seats, apparently. Yes, absolutely. But where's the change? If he's that committed to scrapping DEI, which he claims to be, then, of course, there'd be no diversity issues in Reform UK at all, would there? Zia Youssef, most notably. And, of course, Farage now using the lexicon of the far left, accusing people of being racist. And, of course, his many, many admissions that he hates ethno-nationalism. He doesn't like nationalism, full stop. Now, bearing in mind, Brexit is a nationalist issue completely. Okay? Nationalist issue. Absolutely nothing to do with centre-right fakery. So Farage played the nationalist card with UKIP. It was all part of the game to measure anti-establishment sentiment and keep it under control. And so what's he actually going to deliver? You know, how is Britain going to be reformed? How are the cities going to be de-balkanised when he wants to continue bringing in a maximum of 600,000 people a year from abroad? We don't need any of these people. Britain is not screaming out, yeah, for foreign labour. Britain has an indigenous labour force, yeah, which needs to be retasked, refocused, and put back into work. That's what needs to happen. That's what nationalists would do in this country. And of course, the thing that he fears more than anything else, because this is what terrifies the globalists in actual fact, is remigration. He's hysterically opposed to the remigration campaign launched by the Homeland Party. In fact, remigration is just a play on words. The British National Party called it repatriation. It's pretty much the same thing in actual fact, with some tweaks, and rebranded as remigration. And Farage is totally opposed to all of that. He's committed himself to an anti-nationalist path. And Tommy Robinson also has committed himself to an anti-nationalist path. They never stop ranting about, you know, the real far right and those online racists. I mean, Carl Benjamin, of course, who once worshipped Farage, then seemed to have turned against him, and then made some videos last week with the Lotus Eaters, which seemed quite favourable to Farage. Another flip-flopping weakling, quite frankly. Yeah, so Carl Benjamin, you know, he's another notorious controlled opposition figure, isn't he? Yes, isn't he? Oh, you don't believe he's controlled opposition either, do you? Well, here's a classic example. He referred to Steve Laws as a notorious online racist on the Lotus Eaters podcast. Amusingly, a few weeks later, they were then demonetized. Not as a result of calling Steve Laws a notorious online racist, but, you know, karma has a wonderful sense of humour, doesn't it? And talking of a wonderful sense of humour in the karmic context, well, if you carry on supporting Nigel Farage, he's going to be having the last laugh on you when he runs away from this country, yeah, loaded with money to a tax-free haven, and leaves you all behind to pick up the pieces. And that is what I see happening. And as for Tommy Robinson, well, come on. Paul Thorpe said this week that if there was a war, Tommy Robinson would be the first one out of the trenches, leading us over the top, really. My goodness. Yeah, be leading himself over the top to his villa in Spain with a bag of cocaine, more likely, in actual fact. And that's what I have to say about these controlled opposition figures. If you claim they're not controlled opposition, show me the evidence. But quite frankly, in the case of Farage, the most damning indictment is not even the theft of the Brexit Party copyright. It's his long-time collusion with Hope, Not Hate. And all of his candidates, those who are allowed to stand, are approved by Nick Lowles and company, that Red Army. So when you vote for him, you're voting for Nick Lowles, aren't you? By extension, surely. Yes, he's certainly having the last laugh on all of you, isn't he? Until you stop supporting him, then you can join us in laughing at him.